So we feel we're on pretty solid ground that this is something that is...
That's why we don't think it encroaches on
Yeah,
federal supremacy,
exactly.
because it falls under the 10th Amendment and the plenary authority of the states and not the federal government.
So you think, despite the fact that the Constitution says no state shall, without the consent of Congress, doesn't apply?
Well, if taken on its face, you would be accurate. But the Supreme Court, as Jim has said, has ruled that language is not taken. It becomes in conflict with the 10th Amendment, where if it's not specifically reiterated, that it reserves back to the states. So it becomes in conflict. So that's where the Supreme Court has said, well, why can't they do this? They can do this, and so that language is on its face not accurate.
Right. Taking that to the next level, the states entered into a contract that does not violate any of the reasons why it should not be a compact.
Yeah.
And therefore, what they're saying is we should look to contract law and provide that with more emphasis than this provision saying you have to have congressional intent. But this gets into another. Sorry.
But one of the reasons for requiring congressional approval is for Congress to look out for the other states, and since this would have such a tremendous impact on the other states,
You would want to
I
have
can't
that.
imagine that the court would, particularly if the Congress declined to accept it, I think that the court would take that into account.
You could very
And
well.
I'm just, you know,
The question that I think everyone should think about, and I'm very glad you brought that up, is how does this impose something on non-member states? Does this do anything to the operations of non-member states? And I think about it. I mean, I know what my answer is to that question, but think about that. Does it do anything to non-member states? Does it change the way non-member states are doing their voting? Does it change the way non-member states are doing their canvassing at the county level, at the state level? Does it change the way non-member states are awarding their electoral college votes? Does it change the way non-member states are submitting those electoral college votes to the U.S. Archivist and to the U.S. Senate and all those people? Does this compact impact those other states?
it affects their influence. Sure. It affects their influence dramatically.
So does Nebraska going from a districted state to a winner-take-all state. It changes
But
their
it's not
power
a compact.
vis-a-vis the other states.
It's
You know,
not their compact, they're doing it on their own.
There's an interesting corollary to that. Back in 1966, the state of Delaware, under their Attorney General David Buxton, filed on behalf of eight small states, against the state of New York, which in the 60s was the big swing state. It was driving all that. And they sued the state of New York because of their implementation of the winner-take-all rule. Now, the Supreme Court denied cert on that, presumably because of the provisions of the Constitution that said a state can do and appoint electors as they see fit, and if Delaware and those other states wanted to do something about it, they could change their law. So this issue kind of, the corollary of what you're saying has come up because these states got together and sued a state which they felt was infringing on their ability to have a fair election and have their voice heard. Supreme Court did not hear it. They refused to hear it.
Well, you can't make an inference from their declining to hear it. You can't, really say why. Because you suggested that, well, probably because it was state law. But you can't make the inference. But one of the things, what if those Delaware, that group of states, had entered into a compact to deal with New York and to sort of try to affect the power? I worry that that would have affected the power of the western states. And I just think that congressional approval is important for Congress to look at the whole map and see and to really really consider our federalism and our federalist system. And I just think not submitting it to Congress would be problematic. And I think if Congress were to decline to approve it, that would be problematic. And I just think problematic for the court.
Well, we'd love to get a resolution. We'd love to get a resolution to that question. The only way we're going to do that is when we hit that 270 threshold. So we'd love for the state of New Mexico to jump on board and help us get there.
Hey, one thing I want to say here.
No, you're raising a very good point. Absolutely, you're raising a very good point.
And one of the things I want to say, I feel like I'm almost trying to sell this. I'm not trying to sell this. As I said, I sort of have my own thoughts about it. I know, you guys are laughing over here. I'm sorry. I didn't know you came. Madam Secretary, you did. Very nice to see you. Yeah. anyway, I know it looks that way, and like I said, I have my own personal opinions, but really the idea here is to try to get these issues out
Yeah.
for you guys to digest. And, you know, I think before you got here, Lana was talking about a report coming out of the citizen panel. Some of the things you're saying are things that we want to have built into, here are the issues that people were talking about. Pros, cons, white's good, white's bad, that sort of thing. So, anyway.
Because what you've been talking about, legal issues, and you haven't touched on the political issues, we're no longer a battleground state, never would be again. Small states like New Mexico lose that influence that they have. Is that right or is that wrong?
Well, you gotta look at the nature of being a battleground state. That is a fleeting thing. For a couple of elections, New Mexico was, but every indication we're seeing, the prognosticators for 2012, you guys are starting, and not to be partisan here, you guys are starting to drift blue, and you're a lean Democrat state now. So you may have one more. Really? Yeah, you may. Yeah. But let me take you back to my original.
Some of us hope that's not the case.
Yeah, it is what it is. The people vote, right? So look back in the 60s, you had the state of New York was the swing state. You had Richard Nixon in 1960 took Henry Cabot Lodge as a vice presidential candidate in order to try to get the state of New York. The texture of who are the swing states changes over time. So it's good when you are the swing state, but when you're not, you're left out.
But there will permanently not be.
There will permanently not be a swing state.
There won't be any
Smaller
argument.
states, they're not.
Not necessarily. There are, let me give you an example. There are 13 small, and I'm not counting New Mexico as a small one because you guys are a little bigger, but there are 13 3 and 4 electoral vote states. In the last election, 6 of them were solid blue, 6 of them were solid red. One of them, New Hampshire, was the swing state, and that all got all the attention there. So it doesn't matter if you're big or small, whether you're a swing state. It's whether or not you are the swing state. State of Iowa is a swing state. You look at California, 55 electoral votes, sent $150 million to presidential campaigns. In 2008, $29,000 was spent in California, completely taken for granted. Complete opposite end of the spectrum. You look at Texas. Big electoral jackpot, sends a lot of money in, but no one pays any attention. So the whole idea, the whole genesis behind national popular vote is to make every vote count in every state in every presidential election. Right now, you only matter if you're in one of the half dozen electoral votes. That's where all the time, attention, and money is. This will permanently make everybody relevant and everybody valid in every presidential election.
This is what I'm trying to avoid, me being that marketing person over there.
I just want to, very briefly on the point that you were making, every state has had the opportunity to enter into the compact. So it would not fall under an unduly, a disproportionate appropriation of power amongst a specific amount of states because no one's been excluded from participating. So it's not like you have California, Texas, Florida, New York saying, we're the big states, we're going to do this because we're going to dictate how things turn out. Because every state has had the opportunity to enter and make that choice about whether or not to enter into the compact. So it would not be, it would just simply be a choice that the states have already made for themselves.
Yeah, I was just dealing with the hypothetical of the situation.
Sure.
Right. No, you raise a very good point. Interestingly enough, to build on what Derek says, back it was proposed between the state of New York and the state of Texas when they were swing state, and it was a young congressman out of New York, Charlie Schumer, who's now a United States senator. He was leading a drive to try to get his counterparts in Texas to enter into a compact where the two states would, the winner of the popular vote between the two, that's who they would appoint their electors to. It really didn't get very far, but that was one of those ones that would have fit under Derek's definition of 2 states to the exclusion of 48. That may fit more of something where Congress would have to step in and look at the rights of the other states. But here, we're opening this up to 50 states plus the District of Columbia. So.
But if you open it up to all the states and only the big states step up and sign up, then I don't think that, I mean, I have trouble with that argument. Because the fact of the matter is, if you get those, I mean, yeah, we're gonna have a vote. We've had this issue in the legislature the last couple of years. But if we make the decision not to do it, along with all the other small states, swing states, and you get a group of big states that jump in, then it just seems to me that, I
Oh, is that just-
You have a hard time, yeah, how you get around Congress.
Right.
Yeah,
Under-
that's exactly right.
Under the current, if we could please, we'll get back, under the current winner-take-all state, you could get a cabal of a bunch of big states voting for the same person and completely wash everybody out. The truth of the matter is, big states go one way or the other. California goes one way, Texas goes the other way. Ohio and Florida swing, but New York is typically blue. But you gotta look at who we have on board. We have small states, we have big states, we have states from the West, the Midwest, the East. It's a very wide swath, and we're not specifically targeting one or the other. You gotta get to 270, and if we just went to the big states, we'd never get to 270. If we just went to the small states, we'd never get to 270. The whole idea is to empower and enfranchise the vote and make every vote count in every election.
And I want
With or without the
Representative.
consent of the other states.
Right.
Well, the other states still can run
With
their,
or without the consent of the other states.
They don't have to consent.
they don't
Right,
have to
I
consent.
understand what you're
Right.
saying, but on the face of it, when you hit 270, their electoral college votes no longer matter.
No, theirs still would count. The 270 electoral votes, say the compacting states total 270. Those states would be the only ones required to appoint their electors based on the winner of the national popular votes. The other
270
states,
is the majority though, right?
270 is the majority,
That's
yeah.
what's taken.
So you figure you're not going to get 270 to 268, because if you're going to win the national popular vote, you're going to win in a lot of states.
Right.
So say those other states split half and half. So you're looking at probably, and this is hypothetical, somewhere in the mid to upper 300s to the low hundreds. So you're going to have a significant win. You'll get the president coming in with a mandate, and every vote will have counted.
Can I interrupt
It's an
on
interesting
this?
point. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No,
Can I
please.
Say something, and then Representative Gentry's got a question or an observation or something as well. But what I want to do is not reframe what's being discussed, because what's being discussed in certain respects is political in nature. It's talking about what's the influence of New Mexico as a very small state in the overall election of the president in many respects. Did I frame that correctly? The other side to that, I want to point back to what Kim had said during the first meeting. What Kim had said was, in the state of Maryland, your father has no incentive to go vote because the state of Maryland is going to go Democratic. At least it has. So he's got no incentive to participate because he's a Republican and he's going to vote for the Republican. So what we're looking at is the difference between a state interest from a political standpoint, interests of individual politicians, versus the interests of an individual voter. So balance it or don't balance it, but to me that's much of the argument that we're looking at here. What do we value? What are the values that we're trying to maintain as a state and as a country? Is the value, we want the economics associated with being a swing state. We want to be able to appear with the presidential candidates and to get our picture taken and get a signed picture and put it up in our office? Or do we want to make sure that Kim's dad doesn't feel disenfranchised because there's nothing that his vote's going to do in the state of Maryland? I mean, to me, that's the argument. But anyway, I'm sorry, Representative Gentry, you're going to say something. Oh, I'm sorry, one other thing, if you can hold that. We got 3 people that came in after we started, I'm sorry. And I wanted to make sure that we got introductions. And Amber, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amber Carrillo. I'm from the Pueblo of Laguna, and I've worked in a lot of very interesting capacities regarding voters and elections, and I'm a student right now as well.
And then we've got
League of Women Agent, League of Women Voters, New Mexico, and Santa Fe County.
Great. And then,
Diane Duran, Secretary of State.
thank you, welcome. Okay, I'm sorry, Representative Gentry.
Is there also a front-end program, a problem in the sense that, as I recall, in negotiating interstate compacts with respect to water allocation, doesn't it require the consent of Congress to also begin those negotiations? Or am I wrong?
Well, if you're talking about at least the Colorado River Compact that we're part of here, that was congressionally imposed on the states.
Okay.
So
And I think that when there's a negotiation, then it's congressionally ratified, correct?
I don't know how whether you want to call it negotiation or not. Arizona didn't want it, didn't ratify it, but they were still part of it because the president said you're part of it.
Okay.
It's potato.
We've looked at that issue actually, and different compacts have done it all different ways. They've gone in before, they've done it after. Our point is that until we hit 270 electoral votes, this issue is not yet ripe, so we're, to go to Congress. But
Okay.
that is a very good point, very good question.
Yeah, I just want to point out sort of an irony that's apparent, and that is that the object of the scorn of the NPV advocates is the elephant in the living room here. You hate the 270 electoral vote trigger unless it kicks in your plan for the popular vote. And so everybody coming back to the great enthusiasm about, well, we don't get there unless we get 270 electoral votes, and regardless of whoever signs on. So it's a terrible thing to have, and yet it's the mechanism being used and applauded for the purpose of popular vote.
Can I ask you to elaborate on?
Unusual thing.
Can I ask you to elaborate on what you mean by it's a terrible thing to have?
No, it seems in reading the NPV's manifesto, that seems to be their view. I'm not saying that it is or it's not.
Okay, so you don't think the Electoral College is a terrible thing to have,
Do I think?
as it works and functions right now?
No, I think the Constitution is not a bad thing.
Electoral college is archaic.
Let's not digress. I appreciate what you're saying, and I appreciate what the League of Women Voters is saying, but we are not changing the Constitution. The Constitution provisions regarding the date of election, the date of the electoral, to exercise the state power directly granted to them by the
I
section.
understand you're not going for a constitutional amendment because that would be much more difficult.
Well, no, because we firmly believe that at this point now, this is a good way to do it. 50 years down the road, we believe in the vitality and the importance of that state power to be maintained. If a constitutional amendment was pursued by someone other than us, at the end of the day, that state power will be gone and gone forever. And we do not want that. We want to preserve that state power, and that's why we're pursuing the compact, right? Because this is something that can, as a state, as their swing state status is transitory over the time, perhaps this will be transitory over time, and our children or grandchildren will be sitting in a room similar to this 30, 50 years from now talking about a more effective, efficient way to do that. But the important thing is Article 2, Section 1, and the brilliance of our founding fathers set forth as an important and vital state power, and we want to preserve that state power. We don't